Well, hello, everyone. It is my pleasure today to welcome Hugh Macleod into this interview that we are doing for the students at Western in the evidence-based health leadership program. This is intended for Module 1, What is Leadership? And there was no greater individual I thought that would be appropriate to sit down and have a chat with, but Hugh Macleod. I'm going to give a brief overview with respect to his extensive background. And you can fill us in a little bit, and then I'll have the detailed information in the supplemental materials. He was the former CEO of the Canadian Patient Safety Institute. I think that was 4 to 5 years you had that role. And then prior to that, you were a senior leader in the provincial government. And I believe you're also faculty at a number of institutions. I'll let you fill us in on that. And then most importantly, you are the author of Humanizing Leadership, and we'll get into your reflections on that in a little bit. So I won't date you in terms of how many years you've had exposure to the healthcare system, and it has been many. And that is why I wanted the opportunity to sit down with you today to talk to you about your reflections on leadership, informal roles within the bureaucracy, I will call it, of the provincial systems, your role as CEO of the Canadian Patient Safety Institute, which to me is just an incredible opportunity to really impact patient care from a safety perspective for our patients. And then you also teach, and you have written, I think, over 100 articles as well on healthcare leadership and the health system. And then on the personal side, humanizing leadership is certainly a personal journey as well in terms of your experiences. So there's so much to unpack. Before I kind of ask you your thoughts on leadership, is there anything you want to kind of detail out about your extensive experience that I haven't touched on?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you and the individuals who are participating in the program. When I think about my journey, I'm kind of I'm a lucky guy, because over my career, when I look back, I was given an opportunity to experience many different kinds of challenges and opportunities. And in the process, I think I gained a new appreciation for what it's like to be on the front line, for what it's like to be a middle manager, for what it's like to be part of a senior team, the pressures of a CEO, and then for a period of 8 years, the pressures on the policy side in my role as an associate deputy minister. I am so grateful for the opportunity to have those experiences. And I'm a very lucky guy again, because over my career, I've had a number of people who have had their fingerprints on my development. In fact, they had confidence in Hugh Macleod before I had confidence in myself. And they provided for me a space to grow, to learn, to fail. And they were there to pick me up. And I am so fortunate. And I would hope that the leaders, the emerging leaders in your class, see their role as helping others continue with their career, along with their own career. And I think of the poet, quote, Machado, and he said, "The road to your leadership is your footsteps, and only your footsteps. Don't copy someone else's footsteps." And I've tried hard over my career to learn from others, but make it my journey.
Wow, that is a powerful message. And I think as leaders, especially in our first few years of leadership, we know that we're new in the role, we're learning, seeking to understand, and just trying to survive all that newness. And you think that, reading a book or seeing someone else in action is what you should be doing as a leader. And you ascribe to perhaps what resonates or what you think leadership should be, and leaving kind of out your own kind of thoughts, personalities, and experiences to shape it because you want to be successful in the role and in your career. And ultimately, the message what I'm hearing from you, and it's my own experience as well, is when we do take the observations, learnings, and best practices, we'll say, of leadership, but we internalize them and kind of take what's meant for us and what works for us and leave the rest behind, and never losing sight of our own beliefs, our own values, our own intentions with leadership. That's what's going to serve us best. That's when we show up as our most leaderful self in service to the work that we're doing in healthcare. I think that's such an important message. And I guess for the emerging leaders that are participating in this course, how would you guide them, or what guidance do you have for them to feel comfortable that that is part of the journey, given it's new and it takes a number of years before you start to get your footing in the healthcare system, let alone the healthcare leadership system?
Well, there's so much in what you've just said, and I'll try and unpack it in parts. The first piece is it is complex. Healthcare is complex. Leadership is a journey of personal discovery. And until you go inside and become honest with who you are and what are the gifts and the skills that you bring to work every day, and how do you kind of lift those skills up, but also being honest in the areas that you're not great in, and don't be shy, and don't feel that you've failed because you're not great at everything. No one is great at everything. But then recognizing that and surrounding yourself with people who have those skills to make you whole. When I think about leadership in healthcare and in any enterprise, I look at leadership as its results through trusting relationships.
Agreed.
I can't have a trustful relationship with you unless I first gone inside and established me and my relationship with me. Because unless I'm comfortable in my own skin, which means with my own vulnerabilities, with my own passions, it's almost like we as individuals, we react, we interpret, we infer, we create, we author, we edit our own internal drama.
We do. Absolutely.
And so coming to terms with that is difficult stuff.
It is.
Looking in the mirror at where you're vulnerable, where you're strong, is a privilege, because you can do it in your private space.
Yes.
And then over time, begin to work it through. And when you get to that place where you're becoming comfortable with stuff, with self, and you don't have to wear that mask anymore, I'm going to say to your emerging leaders in your class, you will make a significant shift from managing others to managing yourself with others. And that is a significant shift.
Absolutely. Wow, that's such a gift. You can read many articles, concepts, philosophies, models on leadership, and some will incorporate the emotional intelligence elements of managing your own emotions, and then some will incorporate self-awareness and building in the reflection pieces that is critical for leadership. And not all put it all together and message it as succinctly as you just did. It's usually kind of layered in with all sorts of other language around leadership practices and philosophies that I think dilutes the importance of what you've just mentioned. And given there's not a lot of curriculum out there or a lot of information as to how important it is to learn yourself and manage yourself as you emerge in your leadership role, do you have any kind of tips that you feel have served you along the way? You wouldn't have figured that out by reading a book yourself in your leadership journey. I certainly didn't either. And yet we've both come through our own respective leadership journeys in the healthcare system to the same kind of conclusion. How do we help support emerging leaders to kind of not fast track it, but to immerse them in that knowledge earlier on, and maybe some tips along the way, whether that's journaling their process, after an event occurs, or.
So again, wow, a lot to think about there. I'm going to start with where you ended. when I did my graduate studies, one of my professors over a coffee posed a question to me, and he said, "Hugh, do you journal?"
Hmm.
Now, this is like over 30 years ago. And
Wow.
I said, "Journal? Journal? You mean keep a diary? Like, we don't do that."
No,
And so we continued with the conversation. Well, I've been journaling now for over 28 years.
I had no idea. Oh my gosh.
And I have a library of all my journals.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps.
And what was I journaling about when I fouled up? And asking, what could I have done differently? When it worked, what was my contribution to making it work? You reference my book, and this and take it off the bookshelf. This book came alive by me going through my 25 years of journals.
Wow.
And what I found so fascinating in the process, what I was journaling about 25 years ago versus what I'm journaling about today, I got to see my growth as an individual.
Hmm.
I laugh now when I think about what I thought were huge issues 25 years ago when I started my journey as being a leader.
Wow.
So the whole notion of journaling, and there was an aha moment in writing the book. I thought, wow, if I had just marginally tweaked some of the conversations I had with people, some of the relationship patterns, we could have turned the boat in a different direction.
Interesting.
Right? Because a lot of times leadership isn't that big wow. It's sometimes it's the small things. It's like the principle of leverage. You put your fulcrum in at the right place and you can lift a rock.
Hmm.
And I found the more I reflected, the more I journaled, the stronger I became inside, but also the more risk I would take to make sure I was surrounding myself from the outside with the strength to make me stronger. I don't know any of the emerging leaders that are going to participate in your program, but we have something in common. We chose to work in healthcare. Therefore, I have to assume we care. Therefore, I have to assume we care about the people that we're there to serve. It's not our title. It's not our profession. We chose to care and to serve patients, residents, and clients. What we forget is healthcare is a human system. We don't make anything. We deliver services to people through people. And for the most part, those services are not individual services, they are team services, a team assessment, a team diagnosis, and a handoff to another team. So when I think about the healthcare system, we have to remove this abstract notion that it sits out there somewhere in space.
Hmm.
These are human systems. These are energy fields. These are patterns. When the relationship patterns are healthy, magic happens. And so there's a line in the book, and I say, what goes on between people defines what a healthcare organization is, and more importantly, what it can become.
Wow.
Now think of that. We all stand in the center of our own relationships.
We do.
So we can impact that relationship by mirroring a behavior onto others. If you as a leader are mirroring the wrong behavior, you give permission for others to mirror that behavior. And what's the consequence? Misattributed, misunderstood, and misinterpreted information. Or to make it very bold and bright, a patient falls between the cracks.
Absolutely.
When the relationship patterns are healthy, magic happens.
It does. Yes, I know that to be absolutely true. And I think at the practical side of management, especially on the, from a middle management perspective in the health system, and we'll, as the modules progress in the course, there'll be some exposure to some of the responsibilities and roles of leaders, managers in the system, and there's so much asked of them. And the entry point into health leadership is usually a frontline manager, somewhere in a healthcare organization. And those leaders don't have a lot of exposure to what we're talking about now in terms of understanding ourselves and understanding the human side of leadership, which begins with us. And they're taught sometimes some of the skills they need to just manage the management landscape. And so I'm trying to, pack and synthesize all that we know from our own experiences, plus what we know from our own research studies of the literature out there. How do we impart on emerging leaders, one or two things to kind of always focus on when the busyness of frontline leadership or management occurs? There will, and so for me, my guidance and advice is that there will always be budgets, there will always be indicators to look at, there will always be schedules to be dealt with, there will always be these many demands of the management position. The one thing that will always be constant is the health professionals working on your team and the patient. And so, yes, there are so many things to kind of navigate and figure out which ball to keep hold of. And as long as you're keeping hold of the ball around the relationship elements of the health professionals you're in service to, on the team, within your leadership scope, and the patient, you kind of look at your roles and responsibilities through that lens and make decisions with that as a guidepost. I think that helps in terms of your focus versus you could have a list of 100 to-dos and you won't ever get all those done. But picking and selecting what to do through those kind of lenses of patient and your healthcare team in terms of what is their needs, what will help serve them best, is at least a good starting point to try to get a handle on all of the busyness you could be consumed with. There's a lot to go with that, and certainly expectations of organizations and leaders that you report to surround all of that. But I've seen many frontline managers just get lost in the minutia of some of the expectations that don't end up serving healthcare professionals on their teams or the patient. So I'm curious, from a practical side, how does an emerging leader, frontline manager, keep all those balls in the air, know what to hold on to as they try to keep the patient and their health professionals center through all of the roles and responsibilities that they have? How do they know what's the important work to hold on to?
Wow. How much time do we have?
I
Um,
know.
so let's go back. Great question, and I'm going to put some context first, and then tell a little bit of a story. Um, I believe that if leaders pay attention to a number of things, it will help them get through and navigate the going forward. Because you're really talking about how do I navigate in this very complex, ever-changing space? Because that's what it is. It is complex, but also pay attention to what's the role of leadership. It's about influencing, it's about change, it's about creating, it's about innovation, it's about being in service to others, as you've talked about. It's about developing of self. So when I think about that, I think what would be my three lessons? Well, one, um, leadership is and always is a work in progress.
Indeed.
So pay attention that you're not going to, there's no cookie cutter here. There's no recipe. You're not going to just take this class and then tomorrow you're going to be a leader. So first of all, accept this is a lifelong journey of discovery, and it's got to be your discovery. Because as Warren Bennis said, if you're walking around in someone else's clothes, that's not leadership.
Agreed.
Two, well, what's leadership about? It's about enabling people to engage with a vision or a goal through stories, through explanation, through making sense of complexity. And then three, it's about setting a direction that's inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
that people actually want to be motivated. They want to actually do the right thing. I said earlier that I'm a lucky guy because over my career, I had all kinds of fingerprints and people who lifted me up when I wasn't ready to be lifted up. But it goes back even further. In my life, my greatest mentor was my grandfather.
Hmm.
And this is a grade 5 dropout. But the wisdom that this man had, and he had a library that would fill my home. He read tenaciously everything, poetry, you name it. So he was a well-rounded, grounded person in reality. And I remember before going off to university, I decided to go into the workforce for a couple of years. And he was 94 at the time. And he lived with us. And he used to call me Huey. And he called me into his bedroom and he tapped me on the head and he said, "First day on the job?" And I said, "Yeah." And many of these lessons I had heard, but today it was important for him to impart some lessons. And going back to guidance, what guidance would you give? It took a long time to figure out the profoundness of the simplicity of what he said to me. He said, one, he says, always you have two eyes. Always look through and around the obvious, both on the outside and on the inside of you.
Hmm.
Goes back to what we've been talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Two, he said, do not tell people what you can do. Show them what you can do,
Yes.
right? Three, he said, you may develop a whole different array of tools for your toolbox, but in reality, you only have one tool, and that is your word.
Hmm.
You misplay it, you misuse it, you may never get it back.
Yes.
Then he said, there's an old Irish poem, and he said, it says, you have two ears and one mouth. He says, ask questions to test assumptions. Listen to hear and understand. And then talk to create a conversation. Don't listen to counter.
Hmm.
Then he says, get out of here and don't be late for work.
Oh my gosh, what a wise man. Oh, what a gift. He's
Yeah.
so,
And when I think about my career at different times, and it's interesting, after writing the book, he's continually whispering in my ear,
oh, wow.
right?
That is amazing.
Because when you think about it, it's about being you. It's always scanning inside and out. It's protecting your value, which is your word, your
Mhm.
principles. And it's not being afraid to engage, truly engage, and to listen.
Yes.
That's what the most effective leaders, when I think about over my career, what were they gifted at? They showed up every day. They were present in the moment. They asked questions, they didn't give answers. They asked the right question at the right time to kind of move the organization forward.
Agreed. And their word was good, and they didn't say, they showed by their actions their leadership style.
And it goes back to the comment I made earlier that all leaders are being observed every day, every moment. And so be careful here, because you get to mirror your behavior onto others.
Yes.
And in certain parts of the world where we're seeing what's happening on the political field, where the leader mirrors a behavior and gives permission to his or her cabinet to follow that behavior. And we wonder why we have toxic environments.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so, some of the key elements that you've shared today align nicely with some of the foundational material we've included in the curriculum, Kouzes and Posner, with modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision, I think those are some key elements, but framed in, I think, in some practical examples of lived experience in a leadership position in healthcare, which I think makes it all the more impactful. I'm curious, when you made the transition into the Canadian Patient Safety Institute and you were CEO there for 4 to 5 years, such an important organization and so needed. I'm curious as to that transition for you and your thoughts about leadership, because you were having influence at a different in a different way than you were, at the provincial table, we'll say, and a different mission, certainly. So I'm curious, as you made that transition, kind of your thoughts on your leadership journey throughout those years.
Great question. So just for some context, so prior to coming to CPSI, I mean, a pretty significant history at senior levels within the delivery system of healthcare, senior levels within the government of Ontario as the Associate Deputy Minister for Health. So understood policy. But my introduction, if you will, to quality and patient safety at CPSI was on day one becoming a patient. And I was hospitalized for 5 days. And it had a profound impact on my view of leadership, because now I'm the patient.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm not just a patient, I'm an informed patient.
Yes.
And I thought I knew the system. And it was an aha for me. We talk a lot about culture. Culture's tribal. It resides on the ward. It changes between evening, nights, and days.
Yes.
There is a difference between weekends and Monday to Friday.
Yes.
The culture on the ward can change with one nurse and one doctor.
Yes.
And so I got to feel, if you will, I got to feel the energy, the patterns of what happens in healthcare. And it had a profound impact on me. Also, I'm an informed consumer, but for the first 2 days, we had just come back from vacation and from an exotic place, and I picked up a real bad virus. And after about 3 days, after they figured out I'm going to survive all this, I began now asking questions. And a couple of things, another aha for me is that we have not, and I did it, I was asking questions, I thought, in a respectful manner. And just as an example, there's a sink across my bed, and there's signage all around the sink, and it says, wash your hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm witnessing all kinds of exchanges where people are not washing their hands. And I'm going to become the CEO of CPSI. Right?
Yes.
And so I respectfully asking questions, and I realize we haven't prepared the healthcare delivery system for the consumer, because I could feel people's backs stiffening up when I began to ask questions. So it was an aha moment for me. And that influenced again my approach to leadership in the quality and patient safety space. So all to say, again, our experiences will impact our journey.
Yes.
Here I'm later in my career, and I've got another shift in my career as a leader because of an experience. So what did it do for me? When I thought about our session here today, I'm thinking about, and you posed the question, you said, well, given your experience at CPSI, was there an aha moment from your lens about what was the differential between leadership in organizations that were doing great work in quality versus folks who are doing average work in quality? And I thought about that question, and I thought, so what if I could single out a characteristic of the leadership in the organizations that were punching way above their weight in terms of quality and patient safety improvement, what would it be? And I got to the place, they brought courage to the table, named the big elephants in the room, the tough issues that no one wanted to talk about.
Wow.
And when they did that, I think they became much more adaptable and agile as an organization.
Yes.
Why? because they were not dealing on the surface. They were prepared to go down to the root and really unpack those tough issues, those big elephants.
Yes.
Doesn't mean they resolved them, but at least surfacing them up provided the organization and that leadership team a fighting chance to truly improve quality. So if I was to pick an area, and it was interesting, after I got to that place, I reread again the great article that you pulled out for the folks from Mayo Clinic. And it's one of the tightest articles that I've read because it reinforces the why
Yes.
we're in leadership. It reinforces the importance of the patient. But if I can, I just want to read a piece from that really stuck with me. And it was that it's in the conclusion part where it should be. And it said, the purpose of leadership is to work with others to improve the situation, because healthcare is about people caring for others. And there should be alignment with how to treat patients and how we work together as staff. Servant leadership is best aligned with professional and ethical duties of healthcare providers in the delivering the high value care patients deserve.
Isn't that,
And
isn't
I
that
think
it?
about that's the conversation we have just had.
Yes.
But the other part that gave me great comfort, that's my book.
It is.
Because my book is called Humanizing Leadership, which is really putting a human lens on leadership. And what are the cross-cutting 3 themes in the book? Reflection fuels. We've talked about the power of reflection. People matter. Healthcare is a team sport. And relationships make the difference.
Absolutely.
And so your article and what you're trying to, and the message, I think, first place.
I agree. So as we look at, oh, I'm just my internet flash unstable. I'm wondering, just in case it cut out there, if you could just repeat that last section of the correlation of your book and the main themes into the conclusion around the reflection elements, relationships. That way I could just capture it. I'm feeling my internet may have flaked out there.
So once again, I thought about the lesson I learned from CPSI and then bridging the lesson to the great article that you sent, and particularly that statement that I just read to you from the conclusion box in that article. The other aha for me was the alignment with my book, Humanizing Leadership. And what I was attempting to do in the book through the vignettes is deconstruct this abstract called leadership, centered on the human element of leadership, because that's what we've been talking about for the last 15, 20 minutes. But it also, the article, I think, reinforces and aligns with the 3 cross-cutting themes of my book. And what are they? Reflection fuels. Well, if a leader is not reflecting, they do not get the fuel drive forward. People matter. Hello. Healthcare is a team sport. Care delivered to people through people. And what's the 3rd theme? Relationships make the difference. I end every one of my workshops, I end every one of my podcasts, I end every one of my lectures with a simple quote, but profound, from one of my favorite authors, and that's Mark Twain. Mark Twain had this unbelievable way of taking simple words and creating in a sentence or 2 such a profound statement of life. And I think what we have been talking about, I think also what's captured in your book is a message he provided us 40 years ago that we have to pay attention to. So let me share with you his quote. He says, "It is not the truth that we do not know that does us in, but the truths we know and don't practice.
Mm.
And when I think about leadership, that's leadership in general. We know what we should do.
We do.
My advice to your emerging leaders, practice it.
And have confidence in what you know.
You got it.
Even as you emerge, have that confidence, and that will serve you going forward, regardless of what will come ahead in terms of the navigations. That is the essence of healthcare leadership in terms of the fires we put out, the challenges to solve, but stick to what you know inside you to be true, and that will serve you through all of that.
You got it.
Wow, this has been a significant gift for me, Hugh, and I'm positive for those participating in this course. I can't thank you enough for your time, for your wisdom, and just sharing your experiences over your extensive career and the gift that you've provided us for your own self-reflection and your own evolution of who you are as a person and then who you've been as a leader and you continue to be in the thought leadership space. So I can't thank you enough for that gift.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.